Look who we have here. Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Starling from Channel 7 here in DC. It is just such a privilege to be here for so many reasons this morning. First of all, we are back in person for the National Book Festival, which is a fantastic thing to celebrate. I know a lot of us were part of it virtually, which was wonderful, and it did the trick. But boy, this is so much better to get to interact in person with our very favorite authors. So we're so glad you came out this morning. And I want to say a special shout out to the beanbag section down here. Hey guys, are we a bunch of Arthur fans down here in the beanbags? Yes, well, you're going to have a chance to ask all the questions you want about our author today. So I want to go ahead and get started, do a brief introduction, although I know you all pretty much know who we have here today, but I want to give you a few of the details. And Arthur, in case you didn't know, is the longest running kids animated series in history. How about that? It is known for teaching kindness, for teaching empathy and inclusion through groundbreaking moments to generations of viewers. It doesn't matter who you ask, they all know who Arthur is, right? Now, they don't always know what kind of animal Arthur is. I've heard a little bit of everything. Who knows what Arthur is? What is it, Arthur? An aardvark. That's right. A lot of people thought anteater, but no, aardvark. Arthur is a global celebrity, recognizable far and wide, and everyone seems to feel a real fondness for him. When we were backstage, someone met Mr. Brown and said, I feel like I'm meeting one of my heroes. And I think a lot of people feel that way because they have a real bond with this character. Mark Brown, who we have here today, is the creator of the best-selling Arthur Adventure book series. It has 160 million Arthur books in print. He is also the executive producer of the longest-running children's television series, Arthur, on PBS. He is joining us today from Martha's Vineyard, where he lives, so we're so happy that he traveled to Washington to be here today. So Mark Brown?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. I don't get out much. I should get out more, really.
So we are here partially to celebrate your new book, and this is it. If you haven't had a chance to pick it up, this is Believe in Yourself, What We Have Learned from Arthur. And this is what you've written after 25 years.
Yeah.
What were you hoping to accomplish with this book?
Well, you know, a couple of years ago when we knew that Arthur was ending on PBS, we were thinking of ways to celebrate 25 years of television and 45 years of books. And to me, the first thing that came to mind was, well, I'll write a book. And you know, one of the things that was hardest for me when Arthur made the leap to television was to share him with other people. I remember going up to the animators in Canada, and the first night, they had drawn all these wonderful versions of all my characters, and everyone went out to dinner, and I was still blue lining their drawings, making little corrections. And it was like about midnight, and I said to myself, you're working with these talented people. This is now a team, you know? So get with the program. And I kind of opened the door to sharing Arthur with other people, and I was very lucky to have an amazing group of writers, animators, and producers, voice directors, and the voices of Arthur. You know, we've had like, I think 14 or 15 Arthurs now, because when we started, one of my requirements was that we use real kids for the characters. And most of the directors didn't want to work with me because they felt kids were too difficult to work with. Really? Come on, have you worked with adults? So we found a director, Greg Bailey, who would work with kids, but Arthur, we didn't expect Arthur to go on television. So after 3 years, the first Arthur sort of hit puberty and his voice got too deep. So we had to find another Arthur. And something you might not know, a little secret, is DW has always been voiced by a boy. We could never find a girl that had that right gravelly sound to her voice. So we've had several boys voicing DW over the years.
My daughter Emma just went like this. You just blew her mind.
Shocker.
I think a lot of people may wonder, how did you come up with Arthur in the first place? And I read that you've actually said Arthur saved you.
Yeah, he did. Arthur was born probably one of the worst days of my life. I was teaching at a small college in Boston, and the college closed. And I went home that night, and I had a young son, and I was really scared. I didn't have a job anymore all of a sudden. And he asked me for a bedtime story. And I was so depressed. I said, I'm going to need your help here, Toland. What should we have a story about? And he immediately came up with a weird animal. And then I said, okay, aardvark, thinking alphabetically. And then I said, well, what should his name be? And we came up with Arthur. And then he wanted me to draw a picture of what he looked like. So I did a little doodle. And you know, that first book, Arthur's Nose, was really about Arthur having a problem. And I realized when I started working on Believe in Yourself that it was really very close to what I was experiencing in my life. I had a problem that I had to solve. And that was new for me. And it was also the last line in that book. It was, let me see, what was the last line in that book? It was, there's a lot more to Arthur than his nose. And yeah, little did I realize that this little bedtime story would turn into now about 100 books about Arthur and become this television show. And there's actually a feature film in the works, and John Legend has decided to get on board.
Really?
Yeah.
I think we're breaking some news here. This is
okay,
big.
This stays within our group here, okay?
Shh, it's a secret.
But and I think it will be a fun way to look at Arthur, because he's going to be a little bit older in this movie. So we'll see him maybe go into middle school.
How exciting.
I mean, does anything worse happen to someone than going into middle school?
I don't think so. You wrote in this book that you describe Arthur as an aardvark navigating the mud puddles of life, which I think is such a clever way to put what you just described, which was you were in a situation where you had a problem.
Yeah.
And Arthur addresses these problems for kids in a simple way. What's been the most fulfilling part of creating Arthur and having it go through all these phases?
Well, when we started Arthur, I didn't want it to be all about him. I wanted it to feel like an ensemble cast where every character in Arthur's world was just as important as Arthur. And I think that's really resonated with kids because it reflects real life. You know, I was so lucky early on to find a wonderful friend in Fred Rogers, who taught me a lot about how to use television to be helpful to kids and families. And he was one of our first guest stars on Arthur. And I'll tell you a little story about my meeting him for the first time. I was really nervous, and my job was to go down and meet him and draw him, because one of my jobs on the show was to turn our guest stars into animals. Like, I mean, Matt Damon didn't know what hit him when I turned him into a bear. So I took my sketchbook, and I knew that Fred had just lost his good friend and piano player, Bob Costa, who played on the show all those years. So my wife, Lori, who's the smartest one in the family, she and I collaborated on this book, When Dinosaurs Die, about death for families. And so I took him that book and a little Arthur, stuffed Arthur. And I missed my flight. I was trying to get to Logan Airport in Boston, where we lived, and there was a terrible traffic jam. Everyone else made the flight. They were on their way to Pittsburgh. And so when I got to the airport, I went up to the desk, and the woman was at her computer. I said, "I've got to get to Pittsburgh. I've got an appointment with Mr. Rogers." She said, "The Mr. Rogers?" I said, "Yeah." And she started clicking away on her computer, and within like 10 minutes, I was in first class on the next flight to Pittsburgh.
He's got a lot of pull, Mr. Rogers.
And everyone was at lunch, and they said, "Oh, just go down to the end of the hall, and you can wait in Fred's office." So I opened the door, and there's Fred sitting on the sofa in this little room, and there were awards covering every square inch of every wall. And he said, "Oh, Mark, I've been waiting for you."
Aww.
And all the tension of the morning just melted away. And I gave him the book. He said, "Oh, I know this. I use it with families all the time." And I gave him Arthur, and he hugged him. And we had this wonderful day. But the best part was the end of the day when I was leaving and I said my goodbyes and walking down the hall, and I hear this little voice, "Mark, Mark." And I turn around, and Fred had the door to his office open, and Arthur's head was sticking out. And he said, "Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine." That's vintage Fred.
What a great story. I love it. Well, I do want to open it up to some questions.
Yeah.
I know there are lots of people who have questions, and lots of kids are here too, so if you guys have anything you want to ask about Arthur. I was asking my daughter Emma, who's 7. Emma, stand up, say hi. And Ava's here as well, she's 9. And I
Yay.
asked her, wave to everybody, turn around and say hi. I said to Emma, "What did you learn from Arthur?" And she said, "How to treat people nicely. I learned about loving, and it's about creativity." And I thought those were
Okay, I did my job. I'm
yeah,
going
there
home.
you go. It worked. So if you have a question for Mark Brown, please, there are microphones situated here. We'd love to hear from you if you want to know about some of the other characters other than Arthur. And we also talked about how you're also the illustrator. I'm not sure, I know people here know that, but
Yeah.
not everybody, it's not often that an
That's a good
author
point.
is also
I
an
think
illustrator.
of myself more as an illustrator,
you?
actually. Yeah, when I started out, I was waiting for great manuscripts to illustrate, and I wasn't getting them. So I realized I was going to have to make those stories up.
Have to do it all.
And I was lucky. I grew up with a great-grandmother and a grandmother who told wonderful stories whenever we wanted them, and they usually came with a back rub. And my grandma Thora would take out her false teeth when she told us spooky stories. So I'm not afraid of questions. I think the scariest question I ever got was from a second grader in Dallas, Texas. And the teacher prepared them for this famous author who was coming to visit. And I asked for questions, and this little second grader in the front row raised his hand right away, and I knew he was prepared. So I said, "Yes, what's your question?" He said, "Mr. Brown, if you're a famous author, how come you're not dead?"
Leave it to
So
kids.
bring on the questions.
And I know the way you wrote this particular book is you broke it into sections, right?
Yep.
Is it 4 or 5 sections?
I don't know.
And it's a chance to pull some of the major lessons from all of
Yes.
your other books, and it's kind of a keepsake. It's something kids can reference if they're having an issue in school. Or I know my daughter Ava just got glasses, and there was a page about getting glasses and noticing other kids who have glasses. You are never afraid to tackle controversial issues, modern topics. Tell me how you decide what topic is what you want to approach, and have you ever been afraid to touch a certain topic?
Well, all the books, television shows begin with real life. Something that happened to me with my kids, my family, or writers on the show, their families. So I think, that really makes people relate to these stories because they're dealing with head lice at home. Their kids are changing their jerseys for sports at school. And one of the more recent shows that we got to do was Mr. Ratburn Getting Married. And I was really proud of that show. And proud of PBS to let us include a part of our world and our friends, our family, who are so seldom represented in the media. So I was really happy about that. And we started out with, let's have Mr. Ratburn get married. And then we thought, well, we have an opportunity to do something really special here. So that was exciting for me. But all the stories do begin with something that happens in real life.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I see we have some people up to the microphones.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, how long did it take for you to publish your book?
Well, it usually takes me about a month to write a story and then about 3 months to do the illustrations in the book. And then when I start drawing, maybe I'll go back and I'll look at the words and I'll say, I don't really need that sentence. Because to me, when I work on a picture book, it's like balancing a scales. You have the words and the pictures, and I always want the pictures to do what the words can't do, and the words should do what the pictures can't do. So it's a balancing game for me. It's a puzzle to solve. And then it goes off to my editor and the publisher, and about a year later, I have a book.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great question. Thank you.
Okay, so what was your favorite character to draw out of all of them?
My favorite character to draw, and think of words to put in her mouth, it would be DW. She is, to get inside her head, I grew up with 3 younger sisters who were just like her. And I kind of combined the 3 of them to make this lethal 5-year-old girl.
And you have a whole section here.
So I really love
DW. I love it.
She has all the good lines. Arthur he's the supporting actor.
Hello.
Hi.
I had like a question and a comment because I read a ton of your books and watched the show when I was a kid. Your sister actually came to my school one time.
Oh, how unfortunate.
I also still know the song Having Fun Isn't Hard When You've Got a Library Card. And now I'm a writer, actually. So I was wondering, I've never written stories I've rarely written stories for young children. So how do you find, being an adult, how do you find a balance between not dumbing it down too much, but also being accessible? I don't know if that makes any sense.
So I didn't catch the last part of your question. How do I find a balance to?
How do you make it accessible for children without feeling like you're talking down or thinking too low?
That's a really, really important thing because I feel like a lot of people who imagine themselves writing for children come to it from an adult perspective. And I think the best writers for children are able to go back to their own childhood and remember what it was like. Like for me, I have no problem immediately going back to Miss Kingston's class in 3rd grade at Lakewood Elementary School. I can see the desks. I can remember the day Dennis Fahey wet his pants in class and his mom had to bring him a fresh pair of pants. And going to the principal's office because Suzanne Lang told me the answers for all the problems in the math book were in the back. And Miss Kingston caught me looking just after she told me. And all the characters in Arthur's world were people I knew in 3rd grade. I just changed their names to protect their identity and prevent lawsuits.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, I have a question. You've had a lot of celebrities on the show, and I was just curious, do they seek you out or do you seek them out? How does that come about?
You never know when you're going to find a celebrity. I mentioned Matt Damon. His mom was one of the advisors on our show who helped us make sure, if we're dealing with asthma or autism, we bring in experts to tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. And Matt's mom is very smart. She teaches at Lesley University in Cambridge. And she talked him into doing that. Or Yo-Yo Ma, he was in a carpool with one of our writers with his kids, driving the kids to school, and he agreed to be on. Or I'll say, I'd love to do a show about architecture for kids. We could pitch it as designing your treehouse or something. And we managed to get Frank Gehry, the famous architect, to be one of our guest stars. So we're always looking for ways that we can use people who are very successful in various walks of life to help us explain what that's like for kids. That's been a lot of fun.
Hello.
Hi.
My question for you is, what was your reaction when Arthur became a really popular meme on social media?
I know, LeBron James posting the fist. Where did that come from? Or John Legend thinks he's really Arthur. I've seen, if you can Google John Legend Arthur, you'll see a picture of John wearing the yellow sweater.
That's amazing.
Being around so long, it doesn't happen for many people who write children's books to have the kids that read your books become adults and then parents. It's a really special thing. I'll be at a school talking to kids in a library, and there'll be a small group of second graders, and it's a school where it goes up through grade 12, and I'll notice slowly the older kids are coming over and they join the group and they're in the back. And now I'm getting invited to speak at colleges and universities about what it is I do to this audience that grew up with Arthur. So it's pretty exciting for me. Like to go to Chicago, and one of the journalists who was interviewing me for the local news, you came to my school in North Carolina when I was in second grade, and I remember you talking about writing and making up stories, and that stayed with me. And things like that are just wonderful to get that kind of a feedback. Like I say, I should get out more.
So we're unfortunately running out of time. Do we have time for one more question? Would that be
Okay, last question. Somebody who really
Okay.
needs to ask a question.
One more question.
Where did you get the idea of his house and the details?
Would you say it a little louder
Where did you get the idea of his house?
for talent?
His house.
For
His
what?
house.
My house?
Arthur's house.
Arthur's
That's the
house.
idea.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have very bad hearing. I have 2 hearing aids. I turned them up really high, hoping to hear every question. So Arthur's house. It's our house in Hingham, Massachusetts, where we lived for many years. I would go into Tucker's bedroom and I would imagine Arthur sitting on his bed or doing his homework at Tucker's desk, and just draw the room and then plug Arthur into the room, or the kitchen with Dad cooking, or Mom doing her accounting work. So, just like the stories, they originate from real life. So do the settings. Thank you, guys. You've been a
Thank
wonderful
you all
audience.
so much.
Thank you for watching the show, reading my books. I really appreciate it. Thank
Isn't
you.
he everything you thought he would be and more?
Thank you for
It's
great
just
questions.
a pleasure. Thanks everybody for coming.